The development of modern society is usually estimated in numbers. Is it possible to estimate our perception of the world? A famous Russian figure, Nikolai Nepluyev, organized a community based on brotherhood. The next speaker, Zvyagintsev Maksim, will share his experience at our today's conference. The social model of labor brotherhood of Nikolai Nepluyev, the principles of conflict resolution within the community. Zvyagintsev Maksim, candidate of Sociological Sciences, the president of an autonomous non-commercial organization, Center for Contribution to Socially Significant Initiatives Inside, professional mediator and legal expert. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for inviting me to the conference. I will straight away address the topic of my report. At the previous conference dedicated to the problem of eco-theology, we discussed the heritage of Nikolai Nikolaevich Nepluyev and his life work, labor brotherhood. The topic of my last report was dedicated to the harmonious development of one's personality. Nikolai Nikolaevich established 15 formulas. One of those was the perfection of personality development. According to this formula, intelligence controlled by love controls the senses. Of course, we were not able to elaborate on this topic last time. Nevertheless, it is very exciting and deep. We gave a general outline, and I would like to develop this topic of the previous report so that listeners get the impression that they are interconnected. This formula of the harmonious development of one's personality reaches the goal of today's report. If people follow this formula, there will be no conflicts in their relationships, although conflicts are inevitable. But this formula is unique. Nikolai Nikolaevich practically confirmed it with his own life, and the results should be spread in the world. I will remind you about the community of Nikolai Nikolaevich, Labor Brotherhood. It was based on 3 pillars. The first one is faith in the living God. He said that this was particularly important. Life in the community is God's will. God wanted His children to cooperate, not to live as separated individuals, but in the community, united with common spirit. The second pillar, which is closely connected to the topic of today's report, love is expressed in loyalty and determination to stay together, despite conflicts that separate people. If people indeed have this deep feeling towards each other, if they cultivate love, this becomes the main goal of their relationship, and conflicts, which are inevitable, will always be in the second place and will not be the underlying reason for the breakup, only because people are not satisfied with anything. And finally, the third pillar is built upon the previous 2 and realized in practice. This is labor. We need to consciously fulfill our duties and to be self-disciplined, to follow these principles on our own accord, as I have already mentioned. The topic of today's report is dedicated to the second pillar, the principles of conflict resolution. What do we need to do? How does love help us to stay together despite all contradictions and continue to achieve the goals that united us in the beginning? Now I will run the presentation so that it is easier to understand. The first and the foremost principle is unity in diversity. Nikolai Nikolaevich thought that unity in diversity is possible if there are two concepts, unanimity and like-mindedness. I think Vladimir Borisovich Sokol will give a speech, and his topic revolves around two concepts, consciousness and mentality. Here, it is almost the same thing, only expressed with the words of Nikolai Nikolaevich. Consciousness can be compared to unanimity. These are experiences connected to our consciousness, and like-mindedness is connected to our manner of thinking.
Единомыслие в сфере мышления. Единодушие — это не запустилось, да, странно. Почему? Должна быть запущена, да. Так, сейчас, минуточку, я прошу прощения. Угу, да. Угу. Сейчас видно, да?
Now can you see it?
Угу. Все, спасибо большое за подсказку.
Unanimity means the unity of values, goals that have become personal for each member of the community. All members of the community try to achieve them.
К достижению которых стремятся члены общины.
Like-mindedness is the practical realization of these goals in cooperation. Unanimity is achieved when common values are cultivated. These values guide the community members and become the main priority of their life, something very dear to their heart and soul.
Чем-то очень важным для души и для сердца. А
like-mindedness is how these values are achieved.
Как эти идеалы нужно
In general, this basic principle defines the rest of the principles.
Базовый принцип,
Nikolai Nikolaevich did not classify these principles. He liked to practice them in live communication.
Эти принципы как-то особо не классифицировал, не выделял. Для него больше свойственен такой, знаете, стиль живого потока общения. Даже
In his books, he reveals his heart. That's why we have distinguished these principles for convenience. It is possible to distinguish even more principles. But our intention is to give a general outline. Nikolai Nikolaevich said that a person who rejects unanimity and like-mindedness thinks that they are not natural for the human being. And nowadays we can clearly see that people behave according to this point of view. Speaking in modern terms, by their socio-psychological nature, people are relativists. Everyone has his own truth. There is no absolute truth. Nikolai Nikolaevich refuted this point of view. He wrote that according to this point of view, people do not acknowledge that unanimity and like-mindedness are not only possible but come naturally as a result of deep personal relationships based on love. These people do not understand that they cannot learn to love if they do not practice love. Relativism as a philosophical movement is based on philosophical speculations. It cannot be applied in real life. Nikolai Nikolaevich was against it. We cannot prepare to unanimity and like-mindedness and harmonious life if we have not established unanimity and like-mindedness with people around us. First of all, our close people. If the members of one family are unanimous and like-minded, then you can expand your perception to the whole society.
относиться таким же образом уже и ко всему человечеству.
In the same way, he
Обосновывая эту
used a very
позицию,
good
он приводил
comparison to
подобное
prove his point.
объяснение. Очень хорошее сравнение. Давайте попытаемся его уловить.
A
Шестеренка
cog
не
will not
будет
be a cog
шестеренкой,
if it is
если она
not
не
a part
является
of the
частью
machine.
механизма. Поэтому
So
венец
the
нашей
crowning
оригинальности
achievement of
или
our
индивидуальности
individuality is not our
это не
individuality,
наша
but our
индивидуальность на самом деле,
personality,
а
which we
наша
can find
личность,
only in
которую мы можем найти лишь
relationships,
в сфере
in a
реальных
team,
взаимоотношений, в формате
community, or
коллектива, команды,
family.
общины, семьи и так далее.
At what
В
moment
какую минуту,
do
говорил он,
two
двое
lovers
влюбленных
can fully
достигают полного
possess
обладания самими
themselves
собой,
when
как
they
ничто,
lose
когда они
themselves in
утрачивают
each
себя друг в
other?
друге. Таким
So, the
образом,
community
сообщества,
in
в
which
которых
there
нет
is no
любви,
love
состоят из
consists
индивидуумов,
of
а не личностей.
individuals, not
Так он
personalities.
противоставлял между
He
собой два этих
contrasted these
понятия
two concepts
индивидуальность
of
и
individuality
личность.
and personality.
Индивидуальность он относил к
Individuality
сфере
was related to the sphere
психофизиологической
of
обусловленности человека, а
psychophysiological
личность
conditionality and
его
personality to his
социальной
social
зависимости
dependence,
и
where his
вытекающей
personal
отсюда на
and
самом деле
spiritual
самоидентификации
self-identification
человека,
comes
личностной,
from.
духовной самоидентификации. Вот, это главный принцип.
This is the main
Следующий
principle. The
принцип.
next principle.
Любовь к
Love for
Богу
God is the only
это
platform for
единственная
unanimity
платформа
and like-mindedness,
единодушия и
on the basis of
единомыслия, на
which
основе
anything
которой
can be
можно
created,
вообще
for
что-то
example, a
создать, какой-то
spiritual
коллектив
community.
духовный, общинный. И
It's the only
единственная
platform which
платформа,
really
которая
allows to overcome
преодолевает,
conflicts,
которая
not only
позволяет
to find
преодолевать
solutions
конфликты
to conflicts,
по-настоящему, не просто их
but to
урегулировать,
overcome
разрешать
them.
или еще что-то, а преодолевать. Ну, это широко,
This
на
statement
самом деле,
is well known.
распространенное,
The
да,
question is
утверждение.
how each of
Вопрос
us
в том, как мы его
understands love
понимаем,
for
как
God.
понимает любовь каждый
On
из
purpose,
нас.
it is
И здесь
indicated
не
that we mean
случайным
not
образом мы
only love
указали, что
itself,
имеется в виду не просто
like an
любовь
abstract
сама
idea,
по себе, как
but love
таковая,
for
как
God.
абстрактное какое-то
Nikolai
понятие,
Nikolaevich did
а
not
любовь
believe
именно
in
к
the
Богу.
existence of some
И Николай Николаевич,
independent
он не
love
считал, что
to a
существует
person,
какая-то вот
to a
самостоятельная
country,
любовь,
to the
допустим, между
nature.
людьми, или любовь к родине, любовь к природе,
Love
еще
can
как-то.
naturally exist
Любовь
only as love for
может
the Supreme
существовать в своем
Lord.
естественном виде только как любовь к Высшему, как любовь к Богу.
Everything else
А
is the
все остальное
reflection
является
of love
отражением
for
этой
God.
любви. И если нет
If
любви
we
к
do
Богу,
not
то не
have
будет
love for
никакой
God,
любви
no
между
love
людьми,
between people is
не
possible.
будет
Eco-theology,
никак на
love for
повестке дня
nature
никогда
will
не будет
never be
стоять
on our
проблема
agenda.
экотеологии, то есть люди не будут любить природу и так далее.
As a
Вот
faithful
он,
Christian, he
будучи
proved his point with the following
христианином
verses from the
глубоким,
Gospel.
он приводил, в частности, из Евангелия такие
This
подтверждения.
is the
Да?
first
Это первое
message of
послание
Apostle
апостола Петра
Peter.
3:8.
He
Оно
encourages
начинается
people to
с
be
призыва к
like-minded, be
единомыслию,
sympathetic,
братолюбию
to
и
love one
и
another,
дружбе.
to
Послание
be
апостола
compassionate and
Павла к
humble.
римлянам
The Epistle
12:16.
of Paul to the
Будьте
Romans, live in
единомысленны между
harmony with
собой,
one another.
не
Do not be naughty,
высокомудрствуйте,
but
но
associate with the
последуйте
lowly. Do
смирению,
not
не
claim
мечтайте
to
о
be
себе.
wiser than you
Также там
are.
же в 16, 17, 18.
I appeal to
Умоляю
you,
вас, братья,
brothers, to watch
остерегайтесь
out for those
производящих
who cause
разделений и
divisions
соблазнов,
and create
вопреки
obstacles
учению,
contrary
которым
to
вы
the doctrine
научились, и
that you have been
уклоняйтесь от
taught.
них, ибо такие
Avoid them,
люди
for such
служат не
persons do not
Господу
serve
нашему
our
Иисусу
Lord Christ,
Христу,
but
а
their own
своему чреву,
appetites, and by
и
small talk and
ласкательством и
flattery
красноречием
they deceive the
обольщают
hearts of the
сердца
naive.
простодушных.
The first epistle
Также
to the
первое послание к
Corinthians.
Коринфянам
I appeal
апостола
to you,
Павла
brothers, by
1:10.
the name of our
Умоляю вас,
Lord
братья,
Jesus
именем
Christ,
Господа
that
нашего
all
Иисуса
of you
Христа,
agree,
чтобы вы
and
все
that
говорили
there be
одно,
no
не было
divisions
между
among
вами
you,
разделений,
but
но
that
чтобы вы
you be
соединены
united
были
in the
в
same
одном
mind
духе
and the
и в
same
одних
spirit.
мыслях. Второе
The second
послание,
epistle,
13
agree
место.
with one
Будьте
another,
единомысленны,
live in
мирны,
peace,
и
and
Бог
the
любви
God
и
of
мира
love and
будет с
peace
вами.
will be with
То есть
you.
даже вот эти принципы
These
универсальны на самом
principles are
деле для любой
universal for
духовной
any spiritual
культуры,
culture or spiritual
можно даже сказать,
science.
для духовной науки. Он
He
привел на
gave
примере
examples from
из
the Gospel, his
Евангелия,
religious
из родной ему
tradition.
религии. Поэтому в
In the
большинстве
Holy
своем Священное
Scriptures, it
Писание
is
сходится на
stated
том,
that
что
the basis
основой
for
единения,
conflict
позволяющего
resolution is
преодолевать любые
sincere love for
противоречия,
God.
является самоотверженная любовью к Богу. Но нам
From the
интересен с
practical
практической
point of
точки
view, we
зрения
will
механизм,
analyze the
как,
mechanism.
признавая
If we
любовь
acknowledge
к
love
Богу
for God
высшей
as a
ценностью,
supreme
можно
value,
непосредственно
how can we
применить
apply this knowledge to a
это
particular
знание
problem?
вот конкретной
How
проблеме,
to
как
overcome
преодолевать
contradictions
противоречия
in
внутри коллективов,
communities
если мы
if we acknowledge these
эту цель
values?
признаем. И то же
He
самое,
refers to the Gospel, the first
ссылаясь на
epistle to the
Евангелие, первое
Corinthians of
послание к
Apostle Paul.
Коринфянам, апостола Павла 8:3.
But if anyone loves God,
Что
he
любовь
is known by
научает.
God.
Кто любит Бога, тому дано знание от него.
I need to say
Не
that
нужно
the same
сказать,
thing
что
is stated
и в
in
других
other authorized holy
признанных,
scriptures,
да,
such
священных
as
писаниях
Quran,
распространенных, допустим, в Коране
and
64:11.
whosoever has faith in
мысль
Allah,
проводится,
Allah
допустим, сердце того, кто
directs his
уверовал в
heart
Аллаха,
along the right
он
path.
наставляет на прямой
Allah
путь.
has
Аллах
knowledge of
знает о
everything.
всякой вещи.
If we turn to the
То же
Indian
самое, если мы
tradition,
обратимся
Bhagavad
к
Gita,
индуистской традиции,
to
Бхагавад-гита
those whose
10:10.
minds are
Тем, кто
always
постоянно
united
служит
with
мне
me
с любовью и
in love and
преданностью, я
devotion,
даю
I
разум,
give the
который
divine
помогает им
knowledge by
прийти ко
which they
мне.
can
И
attain me.
аналогичные указания
The
вообще
same
в
thing is
ведических
expressed in a
источниках
great
содержится в
number of
огромном
verses in the
количестве
Vedas, in
писаний,
Bhagavata
в частности,
Purana
в Бхагавата Пуране,
175,
Пуране
285,
1.7.5,
7,
2.8.5, 7,
14,
14, 38, огромное
38.
количество
There are many
стихов,
verses where it is
суть которых
stated
заключается в
that
том,
within the
что
heart of every living being,
утверждается, что в сердце каждого
the
живого
Lord
существа
Himself, as the
Бог
Supersoul,
проявляется
Paramatma, becomes
как
the
духовный
spiritual
учитель
master,
человека, да, он ведет
and
его всю
from
жизнь в
without
виде
He becomes the
сверхдуши или
spiritual
параматмы, которая
master in the
присутствует в сердце
shape of
каждого.
scriptures,
А извне уже
saints,
как
and the
непосредственно духовный
initiating
учитель,
spiritual
как наставник
master,
духовный,
who show
а
us
также в
how
форме
to
священных
follow
писаний
these
и святых
instructions
людей,
in
которые своим
practice.
образом жизни показывают, как притворять на практике, притворять в жизнь наставления этих священных писаний.
We can see
Так
from the
вот, как
quotes
можно было
that
заметить
the
из
ability to feel love
процитированных
for God
источников,
in our
из отрывков,
hearts
возможность проявления соответствующего
depends on the
откровения в сердце,
ability
которое
of
позволяет
each member
эту
of our
любовь
community
почувствовать к Богу,
to
зависит от
feel
того,
unity and love
насколько
for
каждый член
others.
общины, каждый член коллектива осознает или
To
чувствует
which
эту потребность
extent a person
личного
tries to
единения, любви к
subside his
другим.
own individuality
Насколько
to
каждый
his
член
personality,
общины стремится подчинить свою
to
волю,
follow
свою
common values.
индивидуальность, подчинить на самом деле своей личности, подчинить
In other
объединяющему
words,
этот коллектив, эту
revelations
общину
happen when
к общему
people
идеалу.
consciously,
Иначе
voluntarily,
говоря, откровения
sincerely
проявляются там, где
sacrifice
люди
their own
свободно,
interests for the
сознательно,
sake
добровольно,
of
по
a
доброй
common
воле от
goal,
чистого сердца жертвуют
not
своими
in a
интересами
blind,
ради
silly, and
объединяющей
fanatical
цели. Не
way,
глупо,
but
конечно, не
according to some
фанатично, не
principles,
слепо, в
without
рамках
any
определенных механизмов,
expectations.
систем, о чем мы и говорим сегодня. Да, существуют определенные принципы, но тем не менее это должно происходить без каких-то ожиданий.
Another
Другой
interesting
очень
principle we
интересный
have
принцип,
distinguished on the
следующий,
basis of Nikolai
который
Nikolaevich work,
мы выделили на основе трудов Николая Николаевича, это любовь
love
возможна
is possible
только при
only on the
добровольной
basis of
дисциплине.
voluntary
Вообще, в
discipline.
самом
It
провозглашении, в
seems
самой
that
формулировке
this
этого принципа
statement
существует как бы
there is a
внутреннее
contradiction
противоречие, потому
because
что мы
we
ожидаем,
expect that
что
love
любовь это какое-то вот
is
такое
the natural
естественное,
feeling that does not
самодавлеющее чувство,
require
которое
or
не
even
требует, даже
contradict
противоречит какой-то
any kind
организации,
of discipline
дисциплине. Да, и
or
поэтому постоянно
organization.
существуют эти
That's
проблемы
why
между
constantly there are
свободным
problems between
выражением,
free
волей,
will
творчеством
and
и
creativity,
каким-то менеджментом,
management, and
организацией,
organization.
принуждением и так далее. Но
Nikolai
Николай говорил,
Nikolaevich
что любовь
says that
без
love is
этой
not possible
организации
if it
просто
is not
невозможна.
organized.
Как он это
How did he prove it?
обосновывал?
He
Он говорил о
said
том, что
that there are
существует
three forces
условно
that
три
encourage
силы,
people to
которые
act.
мотивируют
They are
человека на
love.
какую-то деятельность. Ну, может быть, многие из вас знают об этом. Это любовь,
I mean, love for
имеется в
God
виду любовь к Богу
is a
как
uniting
объединяющая сила,
force,
главная объединяющая
fear
сила.
and
Это
greed.
страх и это корысть.
As we have already said, love is a universal way to solve personal conflicts within a group or a community or a family.
Группы, будь то община, семья и так далее.
Why is that?
Потому что участники, по какой причине? Да? Потому
Because
что
the members
действуют
act on their
добровольно,
own
не
accord.
лишая свободы
They
выбора.
have their freedom of choice. This is
Это
the main
главный
factor that
мотивирующий
stimulates people to come together
стимул
using
для
their
того, чтобы
independent
люди
creative
в
energy.
рамках какого-то творческого порыва самостоятельно
As a
преисполненной
result,
энергии
people
живой
want to
могли
cooperate on a
объединяться
long-term
и
basis
хотели, самое
to
главное,
save their
сохранить свой
relationships,
коллектив,
even
свои
if they
отношения,
contradict
даже если
their
это
individual
противоречит каким-то
values.
индивидуалистическим интересам, ценностям, каким-то меркантильным. Вот, то есть ценность
Loving relationship
любовных
is a lot
взаимоотношений
more
была намного
valuable
выше для
than
них и
their own
ценнее, чем
desires.
собственные какие-то желания. По словам
According to Nikolai
все страстно
Nikolaevich,
желают
all
такой
people
свободы,
crave for
однако вот
freedom,
не все
but
хотят
not
понять,
all
что
of them
никакая
want to
свобода
understand that
невозможна без
freedom is not
подчинения
possible if you do not surrender to the
дисциплины, без
discipline of
подчинения
love.
себя дисциплине любви.
Nikolai Nikolaevich said that kindness is a desire for unity, a desire to express this love in your own life.
Стремление, так сказать, к объединению, да, стремление к выражению этой любви в своей жизни.
Out of love for kindness and to the members of his community, a person does not want to harm anybody. As a result, he becomes able to use unlimited freedom and does not misuse this freedom. But if there is no love, then life becomes controlled with other forces, fear and greed. If a person does not voluntarily surrender to love, he does not sincerely serve to satisfy common interests that have been accepted in the community. Then his discipline is based on fear. When a person does not do anything dangerous, I don't want to do that because this puts me in danger. I don't want to sacrifice my material desires for the sake of common values. I am endangered because I become deprived of protection, stability, and become fearful and subsided to greed. I do not do anything that does not correspond to my own interest and does not satisfy my desires. And until we get rid of these two things, we cannot follow the path of unalloyed love, which helps us to solve conflicts. The next principle, love does not allow exploitation. Apparently, according to Nikolai Nikolaevich, we can teach people to love only by loving them. But he noticed something that not all people can accept, including his religious tradition. The problem is that love spoils people who do not practice it. And such people take it for granted and do not acknowledge that they should give love in return. They try to exploit these pure intentions of people who love them. On the contrary, a person who practices such love understands his duties not only to his loved ones, but to the source of universal love in his creation and love in the material world. For this reason, Nikolai Nikolaevich thought that love needs to be expressed differently towards those who are on the side of love. Such person gives love first, not only reciprocates. I should show my affection first, not expecting to be loved. Otherwise, love ceases to be love. It becomes the accepted convention. So we do not act for the sake of love, but in order to establish justice. Love and justice, from the first glance, cannot live together, but Nikolai Nikolaevich proved the opposite. Many times. Love requires to be expressed differently to those who reciprocate and who do not.
К тем, кто отвечает на любовь, и к тем, кто противится этой любви.
If a person is on the side of evil, he takes love for granted and does not reciprocate, shows hatred in return. And this often happens, we know from our own experience. Otherwise, love becomes insensible and encourages evil. Love is sacred for those who express love. Love spoils people who do not express love in return. It causes a person to think that everyone must love him. If someone is strong and I am weak, then naturally the strong person is obliged to take care of me, show his affection, and I should accept it without giving anything in return. That was the opinion of Nikolai Nikolaevich.
протестовал. Но я буду сокращать, потому что
I will
я
be
чувствую, не успеваю.
concise.
Следующий
The
принцип
next principle is
единение без объединения
there is no
ресурсов
unity
и
without
отказ
using
от
resources in
индивидуальных привилегий
cooperation
не
and
существует.
rejecting individual
Община, как и любой
privileges.
другой
A
межличностный
community as
союз,
an
невозможно
interpersonal
без
unity is
тесного
not possible
взаимодействия
if
на
we do
уровне
not use
ресурсов.
our
Это
resources
Николай
in
Николаевич понимал,
cooperation.
как никто
Nikolai
другой.
Nikolaevich
То
understood
есть,
this like
чем меньше
nobody
интеграции
else.
на
If
уровне
we do not
ресурсов есть такая зависимость,
use
тем больше шансов
resources in
перевести любовь
cooperation,
из
then our
плоскости реальных
relationship is
взаимоотношений
likely to
в
become
сферу какого-то
not real
виртуального
but
взаимодействия.
illusionary.
А понимание
And the
любви из
understanding
сферы
of love
переживаний
will
в
not
своем
be based on
сознании, в душе,
feelings of our hearts, but on abstract
в сферу
thoughts.
каких-то абстрактных интеллектуальных измышлений.
So it is very important not only to speak about your
Поэтому
love,
так
but to
важно
confirm it
не
with
просто
actions.
заявлять о своей любви, но еще и подтверждать ее делами. Вот так можно
So we have
кратко
formulated
и
this
по-простому
principle.
сформулировать этот
In
принцип.
the
То есть
nutshell,
нужно как-то
we
что-то
need to
делать,
do
что-то
something, make
изменять как-то
changes,
природу,
cooperate,
как-то
so that as a result we
взаимодействовать,
prove
чтобы в
our
результате этого
intentions with
взаимодействия
real actions.
объединялось не просто наше желание как-то послужить, но мы еще доказывали свои намерения конкретными делами.
The next principle is love means to take initiative in a relationship, not to expect it from others. We have discussed this principle already, but now we will emphasize some points. Nikolai Nikolaevich said there is a psychological phenomenon. We inevitably judge others by ourselves, and we think that if something is natural for us, it is natural for others.
And
if it is not natural for us to give love in return, we will think that all people should behave in the same way. And if we do not have any love experience, we will suspect that people who openly show their love are not sincere. They are pretenders. Under the circumstances, conflicts will be inevitable. We will not trust even ourselves when a timid feeling of love arises in our hearts. We will not understand what is going on. Where is it coming from? Maybe I need to go to sleep and it will fade away. Because of this perverted approach, people who are sentimental and spiritually weak, unable to express love, will be considered nice. Someone who smiled at me or encouraged me with some nice words in a difficult situation, but did not do anything, did not change my life, did not take part in my life, but just smiled nicely, will be considered sincere and straightforward.
Такие люди будут признаваться искренними, прямыми.
People who really love me will say, you caused this problem yourself, and I will help you to get out of the situation, but you should make efforts. They will be considered pretenders that do not really love us. Nikolai Nikolaevich shows that this situation is turned upside down. I do not have enough time to finish, so we will make a conclusion and I will answer your questions if possible. All these principles we have mentioned are not only theoretical.
Nikolai
Nikolaevich emphasized many times this was the leitmotif of his entire work, his philosophy, and his service to the world. Until we only speak about love and do not experience it, we are satisfied with an illusionary brotherhood in words, or an illusionary brotherhood for 1 hour on some special occasion on holidays, but we do not really want neither the brotherhood of our minds, like-mindedness, nor the brotherhood of our hearts, unanimity, nor the brotherhood of our lives.
И пока мы только говорим о
Until we
любви,
only speak about love and do not love, we have got only the theory of love.
ничего не
In reality,
изменили в
we
нашей
do not
жизни, в
change
наших
anything
отношениях
and
и
continue
продолжая
to
жить
live
так, как
as we
жили,
used to
когда о любви и
when
не
we
думали.
did not think
Любовь
about love.
обязательно вызывает
Love
потребность
encourages
более
us to
тесного
communicate
общения с
closely
любимым
with our
существом.
loved
И чем
ones.
более
The
велика любовь,
greater love
тем
is,
более велика
the more we
потребность в
communicate.
общении. И
If
именно
we
такое
understand the
стремление,
value of
оно
such love,
позволяет,
we are
именно
able
вот
to overcome
осознание
conflicts
ценности этой любви,
regardless from
оно
the
позволяет,
circumstances
несмотря ни на
and
что,
continue to be
преодолевать
part
все
of a
противоречия
team,
и оставаться
community,
друзьями,
brotherhood.
сослуживцами в коллективе, членами общины, членами братства и так далее. Сохранять эти общества. Ну, вот, пожалуй,
I
все.
think that's all for today. Thank you very much. There are a lot of questions. This report was very practical. The principles can be applied not only when we build a community, but with family and friends. I will ask you some questions. Can we apply these principles to international relationships?
Ну, короткий вопрос, конечно. Можно, конечно.
Of course we can. In the world, there is integration on the level of economy, politics.
Не только экономическая интеграция на уровне экономик государств, политические
Political unions are created.
То есть мир,
We can see that the world is becoming integrated, transnational.
становится транснациональным.
The boundaries are fading. This is happening because we are on the ground of universal human values close to everyone.
Общечеловеческие ценности, какие-то вот вещи, которые близки к каждому.
There is no ideal solution, but we can apply some basic principles thanks to this economic and political integration. This is quite easy. This is what Nikolai Nikolaevich wanted when he created his labor brotherhood in his own life, and he wanted to transform it to the international labor brotherhood. Excuse me, there's a personal question, but I'm interested. Marina asks, do you apply these principles in your own family? We try to. Do you love and are you loved? Do I love? I want to learn too. Am I loved? Yes, I am surrounded by people who do a lot for my happiness, and I am very grateful to them. So you have realized it. Dmitry asks how to inspire people to follow Nepluyev's principles if they do not find them attractive. You need to be inspired yourself and stop expecting people to follow any principles. If you want, you can always do that and be happy and satisfied when you follow the Holy Scriptures, which transform your life and connect you to God and help you to manifest love. There is one question. I will try to make it shorter. Bhagavata Purana says that degradation of humanity is inevitable if we follow Nepluyev's principles. Is it possible to avoid degradation when people are greatly reduced in size and eat their own children? These are material things. Only material things are degrading, like any process. Of course, in some sense, our environment influences our consciousness. Vladimir Borisovich Sokol explains that consciousness prevails. Thanks to our conscious efforts, we can change any material situation so that this is not a problem. That does not prevent us from expressing love. We are not so tough, but life is. This idea is wrong, not scientific. Thank you very much for a very joyful conclusion of your report. Unfortunately, we need to finish.